Chapter 27. The Grand Plan of Bloodsource Peak. The one riding that young dragon looks pretty big, Aegon shouted toward Daenerys. Daenerys called back loudly, it's some kind of monster with dragon horns. No idea how it managed to tame a young dragon. The two dragon knights chasing them are wearing Blood Peak uniforms, they might be trying to retrieve an escaped experiment. Blood Peak. Aegon had a rough idea from his implanted memories. Blood Peak was a Valyrian Freehold facility for researching blood sorcery. But beyond that, he knew little. Blood mages almost never showed up in Freehold wars, and the ones at Blood Peak seemed more like researchers than warriors. High in the clear blue sky, the three-dragon clash grew increasingly intense. The two adult dragons had moved into action, splitting apart in perfect sync to encircle the black young dragon from both sides. In an instant, the young dragon's situation turned dire. It was caught in a trap with nowhere to run. Just then, the horned monster riding atop the young black dragon did something that left Aegon stunned. The figure stood up slowly on the dragon's back, then calmly drew two longswords from his waist, one held upright in front, the other reversed in his left hand at his side. As one of the adult dragons closed in, just a few meters from the young dragon, the monster suddenly bent his knees and, channeling explosive power through his legs, launched himself into the air like a soaring eagle. In a single bound, he leapt toward the back of the adult dragon closing in. He just jumped mid-air, straight into a boarding fight. That's insane. Daenerys gasped, eyes wide in shock as she cried out. Aegon, beside her, frowned. Thanks to his chip implant, his vision was far sharper than Daenerys'. He narrowed his eyes. How is he using Gemon's techniques? And those swords, they're Gemon's. Didn't Daenerys burn both swords with Gemon's body? Could it be that monster? It might be Gemon. Look. He's using Gemon's sword style, and those are definitely Gemon's blades, Aegon quickly shouted. The words hit Daenerys like a bolt of lightning. She gasped, covering her mouth with both hands, her eyes wide with disbelief. She stared blankly at Aegon, then suddenly turned her head sharply to look back at the battlefield, where the three dragons were locked in fierce combat in the sky. Up above, the situation was shifting rapidly. The monster, no, Gemon, had successfully landed on the enemy dragon's back. Without hesitation, he gripped both Valyrian steel swords and slashed down with all his might at the dragon's wing. A flash of steel gleamed, the blades were about to slice deep into the creature's wing. But the opposing dragon knight had already acted. The moment Gemon leapt, the rider had calmly raised a heavy crossbow, already loaded and aimed. With a sharp click, the black bolt shot out like lightning, striking Gemon squarely in the abdomen. The sheer impact sent Gemon spinning off balance. He lost control and plummeted from the dragon's back. The adult dragon, enraged that anyone had dared land on it so easily, reacted with fury. Its massive body twisted, and its thick tail, like a giant whip, snapped through the air toward the falling figure. In that critical moment, the black young dragon streaked down like a black arrow and threw itself into the path of the tail, taking the full blow for Gemon. Crack! The black dragon and Gemon crashed together from dozens of meters in the sky, plummeting toward the ground. Aegon and Daenerys had no time to intervene. They could only watch helplessly as the dramatic scene unfolded. They exchanged a quick look, then, ignoring the circling adult dragons above, dove toward where Gemon had fallen. With a light jolt, they landed one after the other. The moment their dragons touched down, Aegon and Daenerys split up and began searching through the dense brush. After several tense minutes, Aegon finally spotted Gemon's twisted form behind a thick tangle of undergrowth. He lay motionless, eyes shut, completely unconscious. His grotesquely transformed body was badly cracked and torn from the fall, the broken armor-like scabs revealing raw, bloody flesh beneath. Aegon rushed forward, parting the dense foliage. Daenerys caught up quickly, and when she saw Gemon's mangled, terrifying state, her eyes welled up red. Just then, the sound of approaching footsteps broke through the stillness. Moments later, two armored figures emerged, one tall and broad, the other thin and wiry. These were the same Blood Peak dragon knights who had appeared in the sky earlier. The tall one had sharp, narrow eyes, while the thinner one looked somewhat worn, but his gaze was keen and calculating. Without hesitation, they made their way straight toward Gemon. Aegon and Daenerys immediately stood up and blocked their path. Seeing the obstruction, the tall knight was the first to speak, his voice loud and commanding. Hey, you two, hand over that dragon freak lying on the ground. He jabbed a finger in Gemon's direction. The thin knight chimed in sharply, voice high and cutting. That's right. That thing's a target of Blood Peak. Don't cause yourselves trouble. Be smart and hand it over. Behind them, two large adult dragons followed, one brown, one blue, each over 30 meters long. At their words, Dany's brow furrowed. There was no way she could just let them take Gemon away. Seeing her expression, Aegon leaned close and whispered, "What's Blood Peak's status? Can we kill them?" Daenerys gave a small, silent nod. The two dragon knights, seeing the pair whispering instead of answering, began to grow visibly impatient. The tall knight barked impatiently, "Enough with the nonsense. Hand him over, now, don't waste our time." So Blood Peak thinks it can just rob whoever it wants. Aegon replied coolly, flashing a subtle hand signal to Daenerys, instructing her to have Dreamshade ascend and lie in wait for an aerial ambush. At that moment, the dragon knight's eyes drifted to Tiamat behind Aegon. The distinct features of the red dragon were impossible to miss. Upon seeing this unmistakable royal-class dragon, both knights' expressions shifted, flickers of unease flashed in their eyes. The tall one quickly toned down his arrogance and turned to Aegon, saying, "HMPH. For the sake of House Aurelian, I'll give you a bit of courtesy and offer a word of advice. Right now, the grand plan is at its most critical stage. Your house should know what's at stake. If anything jeopardizes it, especially because of you, then even the core bloodline of House Aurelian won't be spared." Aegon's heart tightened at those words, and he exchanged a glance with Daenerys. In that moment, both of them understood clearly, because of Tiamat's prominent red dragon traits, these two had mistaken them for members of House Aurelian. Aegon chuckled and shook his head. And here I was, thinking I'd know what the grand plan was. But House Aurelian doesn't need to explain itself to anyone. You. The tall knight's face flushed with rage, his chest heaving as he barely held himself back. If he weren't certain that their dragons were no match for Aegon's red dragon, he would have already drawn his sword and struck without hesitation. The thin knight stepped forward to ease the tension. "Friend, if you were able to tame a royal-class dragon during the taming tournament, you must hold significant status within House Aurelian." He continued in a persuasive tone, "Even a single misstep in Blood Peak's grand plan could endanger the entire Valyrian Peninsula. You should go ask your family's patriarch. You'll understand just how serious this is. You see the blood sorcery runes on our armor. We're Dragonblood guards of Blood Peak, we don't lie." Daenerys stiffened instantly, as if struck by lightning. She had once received a prophetic dream, a green dream, of Valyria's complete destruction. That vision had brought her endless criticism and doubt. But now, hearing Blood Peak's own men claim that their grand plan was tied to the fate of the entire peninsula, she instinctively linked their words to her dream. She tugged at Aegon's sleeve and whispered, "Get them talking. Find out what this grand plan really is." Aegon pressed her palm lightly, signaling that he understood. He had been subtly coaxing them toward a confession, but the two knights had kept tight-lipped, offering only vague hints. "I found this one first," Aegon said unhurriedly, "and I'm not opposed to handing him over. But first, you need to explain why you were chasing him. What does Blood Peak want him for? Tell me the truth, and I'll give him to you. House Aurelian's word is gold. We don't deceive, we deal honestly." The tall knight's patience snapped. Seeing Aegon still stalling, he scowled, face darkening with fury as he roared, "No comment. HMPH. Are you handing him over or not? Don't waste my time with this back and forth." Tiamat saw the tall knight baring his teeth at Aegon and instantly grew enraged. A violent gleam flashed through her crimson eyes. Her massive body trembled, and a deep, menacing growl rolled from her throat. With a thunderous step forward, the ground trembled faintly. Her towering form loomed above Aegon like a moving mountain, blotting out the sun. Her enormous head stretched over Aegon's right shoulder, jaws yawning open like an abyss. In her throat, a blazing energy began to gather, slowly but steadily, ready to unleash a breath that could reduce everything in its path to ash. The tall dragon knight, who had moments ago been overflowing with disdain, now paled with terror. A chill surged from the soles of his feet to the crown of his head, and he instinctively took 2 steps back, trying to put distance between himself and the terrifying royal dragon. The 2 adult dragons behind him also sensed Tiamat's oppressive might. They, too, stepped back almost in unison, letting out low, uneasy growls. Aegon's lips curled into a faint smile. He rested his hands on the hilt of his sword, calm and unhurried, as if he had everything under control and their threats didn't bother him in the slightest. But only he knew, he was bluffing. The heat radiating from Tiamat as she gathered her dragonfire was scorching. It was like standing beside a furnace. His hair had already begun to curl and crisp from the intensity. If you'd like to support my work and unlock advanced chapters, you can follow me on Patreon. Up to 20 chapters ahead for now. Patreon comp BlurryDream. BlurryDream creators thoughts. 5 comments 0 vote. Chapter 28. Guardhouse Targaryen for me. The skinny dragon knight crouched slightly, raising both palms in a calming gesture toward Aegon. This dragon creature was first spotted by an inspector during the dragon taming tournament. It was gnawing on a dragon corpse in Rockstone Valley. The inspector didn't alarm it but reported the sighting to us to confirm if it was an experimental subject that had escaped from Bloodsource Peak. When our Blood Mage Master heard the description, he took an interest. He wants to bring it back for research, to see if it could be added as a pillar to support the grand plan. The tall dragon knight sneered mockingly. You really are an idiot. Knowing too much isn't always a good thing. Do you know how all those dragon dreamer families vanished over the centuries? Daenerys's lips trembled. How did they vanish? Because they foresaw the grand plan, the tall knight said coldly. So they were wiped off the face of the earth. The skinny knight's tone grew more earnest. Friend, continuing this conversation is only putting yourselves in danger. Don't press any further. If we reveal too many secrets, we'll suffer for it too. Just hand over the dragon creature, and let's all pretend this never happened. HMPH. So you don't believe in the reputation of House Aurelian. You're trampling on our family's honor. Aegon shouted, eyes blazing with righteous fury. Tiamat roared in fury, opening her massive jaws and unleashing a series of deafening, unrelenting bellows. Saliva sprayed from her maw, mingling with sound waves so intense they battered everyone's ears. Aegon couldn't keep up the act any longer. He was forced to clamp his hands tightly over his ears, a pained grimace spreading across his face. Gods, not again. Please, don't drag me into this. I'm terrified. I swear I'm terrified. The skinny knight cried inwardly, nearly on the verge of tears. At last, when Tiamat's roar faded, Aegon slowly removed his fingers from his ears. He clapped his hands lightly and forced a smile. All right, one last question, really, the last one. What exactly is Bloodsource Peak's grand plan? Fuck. He's onto us, Peter. The tall knight's face changed drastically. Panic took hold as he grabbed the skinny one and bolted toward his dragon, shouting as he ran, the woman's dragon, it vanished behind the red one. It's a setup. We have to run. What kind of freak did House Aurelian raise? The skinny knight yelled, trembling with rage. Blackrock, now. Get us up. The tall knight screamed in panic, his voice breaking as he called frantically for his dragon. Aegon watched the two of them flee like cornered rats, shaking his head slightly. Only now you want to run. It's already too late. He raised a hand and gave a calm wave. Tiamat responded immediately. Her colossal form, like a living warship, lurched forward into a charge. With thunderous boom, boom, boom footsteps that made the earth tremble, she surged toward the two enemy dragons. She was like a living mountain in a full-speed stampede. The raw, violent majesty of her charge was a terrifying spectacle, beauty forged in chaos. One of the enemy dragons had just managed to lift its rider onto the saddle when Tiamat slammed into them like an avalanche. She didn't use her fire. Instead, she opened her massive jaws and launched a savage, physical assault. Boom. A deafening crash rang out, followed by the chilling crack of snapping bone. The brown dragon shrieked in agony. Tiamat, tail raised and swaying excitedly, seemed to revel in the violence. She pinned the brown dragon beneath her, ignoring its desperate thrashing. In that moment, the brown dragon was utterly helpless, like a defenseless creature crushed beneath something far greater. What happened next stunned even Aegon. Tiamat bit into the brown dragon's belly and forcefully exhaled her superheated breath directly into its body. The dragon's organs flash-broiled from the inside, and it died within moments, unable to even draw a final breath. The stench of scorched flesh drifted slowly into the air. As for the two Bloodsource Peak dragon knights, during the chaos of the dragon's clash, they were reduced to pulp beneath the struggle. The blue dragon, trailing behind its fallen companion, finally found an opening to escape. But just as it tried to build momentum for takeoff, Dreamshade appeared above it. During the day, Dreamshade's mimicry wasn't perfect, but under Daenerys's command, she had hidden behind Tiamat's massive body, camouflaged herself, then looped far around in the sky, silently repositioning behind the two enemy dragons. From above, Dreamshade unleashed her breath, a silver torrent cascading like a waterfall, straight onto the head of the charging blue dragon. Caught mid-run, the dragon stumbled violently and crashed to the ground with a heavy thud. Seeing the situation, Dreamshade didn't let up. Using its nimble aerial maneuverability, it flew in the direction the blue dragon had fallen, matching the dragon's momentum as it moved. All the while, streams of silver dragon breath poured continuously from its mouth, blanketing the blue dragon's head without pause. After that fall, the blue dragon never managed to rise again. Though Dreamshade's breath lacked high temperature or overwhelming impact, it inflicted devastating mental damage. By the time Dreamshade finally ceased its breath, the blue dragon lay sprawled on the ground, completely motionless, like a mindless husk. Saliva dripped uncontrollably from its open mouth. It was technically still alive, but its consciousness had been utterly erased. It was no more than a breathing corpse. The battle, a one-sided slaughter, had lasted mere seconds. At that moment, Tiamat was already feasting, ripping into the brown dragon's carcass with savage delight. She seemed to prefer her meals raw. Her enormous, ferocious jaws tore out a massive chunk of flesh, which she swallowed in a single gulp. Blood splattered everywhere, the scene was nothing short of brutal. Aegon watched and shook his head slightly, coming to understand his dragon more deeply than ever before. Tiamat was every bit the beast they called her, worthy of the name, evil dragon. Just then, Daenerys cried out anxiously behind him. Aegon. My brother, he's regained consciousness. He wants to speak to you. Aegon turned at once and rushed to Gemon's side. Gemon looked like a shattered porcelain doll, his body riddled with cracks. It felt as if the slightest touch might break him apart completely. His vertical pupils locked onto Aegon, desperate to speak. You'll be okay, brother. We can still save you. Daenerys sobbed, her voice breaking as she tried to press the cracked plates on Gemon's body back into place. But the pressure only made things worse, more blood welled from the wounds, drawing a muffled groan of pain from Gemon. Seeing this, Aegon quickly knelt down and gently lifted Gemon's upper body, propping him against a nearby tree to ease his breathing. Gah! Gemon suddenly opened his mouth. The corners split all the way to his ears as he vomited up a torrent of blood, along with bits of unidentifiable internal matter. After expelling it all, he seemed to regain a flicker of clarity, just enough strength to speak. Gemon first gave a faint shake of his head to Daenerys, urging her not to cry. Then he reached out, clutching Aegon's arm with trembling claws, his entire body shaking as he tried to endure the pain. It's no use, I'm dying, he said in broken gasps, his mouth barely able to form the words. Actually, even though everyone tried to keep it from me and Daenerys, back on the night you returned to the family, Mother told me the truth, that your father's bastard. I've known all along. Daenerys' tear-filled eyes widened. She turned to Aegon, stunned, her expression frozen in disbelief. Aegon, is their brother? Aegon frowned. Then why did you pretend you didn't know? A strained smile appeared on Gemon's horned, battered face. I thought maybe, if I showed you enough sincerity, it could ease your anger toward Mother, for forcing you away from home. That's why I risked everything to save you, I even tried to let you be the elder brother. I hoped, it might bring peace between us. Aegon fell silent. His mind wandered back through every moment he'd spent with Gemon, the arguments, the struggles, the shared battles. Maybe, at the beginning, Gemon's sincerity had a purpose. But still, he had offered it wholeheartedly. Gemon's slitted eyes remained fixed on Aegon, filled with hope, sorrow, and the weight of something he wanted to entrust. Aegon gave him a solemn nod. You have my word, I won't take revenge on your mother. Hearing this, Gemon's face lit up with quiet relief. He slowly turned his gaze to Daenerys. A single tear slipped from the corner of his eye. He lifted a trembling hand and gently placed Daenerys' hand onto Aegon's. Daenerys, I'll leave her to you, he said hoarsely, each word costing him strength. In his final moment, Gemon placed his clawed hand atop theirs, his and Daenerys' hands joined over Aegon's, and with the last of his strength, he squeezed them together. Protect the Targaryens, for me, brother. If you'd like to support my work and unlock advanced chapters, you can follow me on Patreon. Up to 20 chapters ahead for now. Patreon.com, BlurryDream. BlurryDream creators' thoughts. 7 comments 0 vote. Chapter 29, Lord of Dreams. Gemon's tightly clenched claws slowly loosened and slipped from their hands, falling lifelessly to the ground. At the same time, his weak, ragged breathing came to an abrupt end. Brother. Daenerys collapsed to her knees, her tears bursting forth uncontrollably as she sobbed, unable to form words. Aegon's eyes followed Gemon's claws as they hit the earth. Those final words, Gemon's dying request, pressed a new weight onto Aegon's heart. A responsibility that now extended to Daenerys, and to House Targaryen. He gently turned his palm and laced his fingers tightly with Daenerys's. She immediately collapsed into his arms, burying her face in his chest, her shoulders shaking as she cried without restraint. Nearby, Dreamshade seemed to sense its master's sorrow. It slowly crawled closer, extending its nose to gently nudge Daenerys in comfort. A piercing dragon cry suddenly rang out from the distance. Startled, Aegon turned toward the sound, but the thick trees blocked his view, he couldn't see a thing. It was likely the young dragon Gemon had tamed. Perhaps it had sensed the death of its master and was wailing in grief. Aegon stayed quiet, letting Daenerys lean against him as long as she needed, until she finally cried herself to sleep. Just then, the air around Daenerys began to ripple and distort. Aegon's expression shifted to one of alarm as he turned to her. Could this be another uncontrolled surge of her power brought on by overwhelming emotion? He remembered the last time Gemon had nearly died, when her dream control ability had also flared out of control. But this time was even more terrifying, her dreamscape was bleeding into reality. The light before his eyes began to twist and ripple. Trees wavered with overlapping shadows, and the sunlight split into rainbow fragments, swirling through the sky like a kaleidoscope. Aegon felt dizzy, his head pounding with sudden, unbearable pressure. He shut his eyes tightly, but the warping sensation only intensified, raging in his vision and mind with nowhere to escape. Daenerys, wake up, he called, shaking her urgently. Fortunately, just as Daenerys began to stir, the illusion faded. The distorted world slowly calmed, and reality returned to normal. What happened to me? Daenerys blinked, dazed. She looked around, noticing something was wrong. Her silver hair was floating gently, despite the still air. Aegon exhaled in relief. Your dream ability flared up again. You nearly popped my head like a melon. My hair. Daenerys reached up to touch it, but the silver strands danced away, floating on their own as if they had a will. Aegon pulled up her attribute panel to check, and was stunned. Her base mental power had just exceeded 100. Base mental power referred to the pure mental capacity a life form possessed without any external enhancements like talents or blessings. When an ordinary human surpassed their species' natural limits, they would awaken a new talent, or see an existing one evolve. Daenerys' previous Dreamwalker talent had just advanced into Crank, Dream Lord. Crank, Dream Lord. You can traverse dreams and control the dreams of other creatures. Your dreams can project into the real world. The area of influence depends on your mental strength. Any damage dealt in dreams is projected into reality. Mental power plus 10. Looks like your dream power leveled up, Aegon explained. Maybe once you've learned to control it, you'll be able to manage your hair too. Daenerys blinked at him. How do you know all that? It's my investigative ability, Aegon replied. I can detect hidden people, and also monitor your physical and mental states. Can you check my brother? Is there any chance he can come back? She asked urgently after a pause. Aegon shook his head. Truthfully, he had already reviewed Gemon's stats during their first encounter. He reopened Gemon's attribute panel. Gemon Targaryen. Attributes, Politics, 36, Strategy, 26, Tactics, 35, Mental Power, 63, Vitality, 113. Talents, E rank, Strong Arm, Drank, Mighty, Drank, True Dragon Blood, Dragonseed, A rank, Red God Priest, S rank, Life Code. Skills. Among his newer talents, aside from the same rare S rank, Life Code ability that Tiamat possessed. A rank, Red God Priest. You can receive blessings from the Red God by devoutly sacrificing epic level lives. Drank, Mighty, appeared to be an evolved form of Crank, Brave, unlocked when his base vitality surpassed 100. But Aegon combed through all of it, there was nothing that hinted at resurrection. When Daenerys saw Aegon gently shake his head, she immediately understood. Disappointment clouded her features, and her gaze slowly drifted back to Gemon's now lifeless body. We should bury our brother, Daenerys said softly. Should we use regular fire or dragonfire? As Aegon spoke, he slowly stood and began gathering dry branches from nearby. Dragonfire, Tiamat's, Daenerys replied, joining the search for wood to build the pyre. Dreamshade's breath could damage the soul. If there's even the slightest chance my brother could be brought back one day, I don't want his soul harmed. All right, Aegon nodded, continuing his task. As they searched the area, both of them came across the two Valyrian half-hand swords Gemon had used in his lifetime. These weren't the famed blades of House Targaryen, Blackfire or Dark Sister, but rather Valyrian steel swords Gemon's mother had purchased at great cost from the Freehold. Aegon moved to lay them beside Gemon's body. But Daenerys stopped him. Since he entrusted the family, and me, to you, you should keep the swords he used every day. Aegon nodded slightly in response. Then he called over Tiiamat, who was still feasting not far away. The massive dragon lumbered closer, and her great snout turned toward Gemon's body laid atop the wooden pyre. Dracarys, Aegon commanded solemnly. With a roar, Tiiamat unleashed a searing torrent of flame. The fire surged forward in a massive pillar nearly 10 meters thick, instantly engulfing Gemon's body. The wood piled around him ignited in an instant, reduced to charcoal and ash as the intense heat melted everything in its path. That's enough, Tiiamat. Aegon quickly called out. Daenerys still held a faint hope that Gemon might somehow be revived. He couldn't let the body be completely destroyed. Daenerys stepped forward, hands clasped tightly at her chest, her expression tense as she approached the burning pyre. She drew her sword and gently prodded at the remains, but gasped in shock. The upper half of Gemon's body had already been entirely melted by the dragonfire, fused with the scorched earth beneath. What little was left of his lower body had turned to brittle charcoal, crumbling into powder at the slightest touch. Her sword slipped from her fingers and fell to the ground with a sharp clang. Aegon saw and closed his eyes. Tiiamat turned her head and asked through their mental link, "Should I continue?" Aegon gave a small wave of his hand. He signaled her to stop and return to her meal. Aegon stepped beside Daenerys, gently wrapping his arms around her trembling frame. He kissed her forehead softly but said nothing more. After the funeral, Aegon and Daenerys set off to find the young dragon Gemon had tamed. It had let out a sorrowful cry when Gemon died, but hadn't appeared since, perhaps it had been badly injured. They searched in the direction of the cry and eventually found the little black dragon stuck in the thick branches of a massive banyan tree. One of its wings had been pierced by a branch, but it didn't look seriously hurt. Daenerys quickly called for Dreamshade. Dreamshade bit through the branches one by one, then pulled away the banyan roots wrapped around the young dragon. Once freed, the little black dragon immediately bolted off in the direction of Gemon's cremation site. Aegon and Daenerys hurried after it, only to watch, stunned, as the dragon began devouring Gemon's ashes. Daenerys instinctively moved to stop it, but after a moment's thought, she let it be. Aegon considered touching the young dragon to see if anything had changed in its talents after all that had happened. But the dragon was deeply wary of strangers. The moment Dreamshade's attention wavered, it slipped away and vanished on its own. By then, Tiiamat had nearly finished devouring the brown adult dragon. Her swollen belly bulged high, clearly too full to eat the blue dragon next. Aegon instructed her to kill the blue dragon but leave it for later. He told Tiiamat to guard the hoard of dragon meat and rest. Meanwhile, he and Daenerys flew on Dreamshade to a wide, open hillside where they built a simple shelter. It gave Tiiamat time to digest, and gave them a vantage point to watch for any signs of other dragon riders. That night, the two of them huddled together to sleep. Aegon didn't make a single inappropriate move toward Daenerys. What happened last time, after Gemon's death, had been a moment of emotion and confusion, nothing more. He wasn't the kind of man who would take advantage of Daenerys in the midst of grief. The night passed quietly. At dawn, as Aegon and Daenerys awoke and looked down from the hilltop, they were stunned. Tiiamat had already eaten most of the blue dragon, nearly all of it was gone. She had feasted through the entire night without pause. Aegon couldn't help but marvel at his dragon's absurd appetite. Of course, she had eaten far too much. Now, thoroughly stuffed, she spent the entire day in a deep, rumbling sleep, snoring in contentment. By the second day, Tiiamat had cleaned the blue dragon down to the bone, not a single scrap remained. Aegon quickly urged the lazy, sluggish Tiiamat to leave the crime scene, and relocated her to a secluded mountain hollow where she could quietly digest her massive meal. 2 full days passed before she had completely digested the 2 adult dragons. And the results were astonishing. Tiiamat had grown noticeably, her body nearly an entire size larger. Her total length now reached a jaw-dropping 159 meters, with a huge increase in all her physical stats. She had grown by nearly a fifth in just a few days. Daenerys watched the transformation with wide eyes, utterly speechless. The rate at which Tiiamat was evolving completely defied natural law. Aegon carefully inspected her talent panel. Her greedy feast ability had now reached level 3/10. With that, they resumed their original dragon hunting plan. So far, no one from Bloodsource Peak had come looking for them, giving Aegon and Daenerys the chance to keep going. But the deadline for the dragon taming tournament, just half a month, was drawing near. Time was running out. They had to move quickly. If you'd like to support my work and unlock advanced chapters, you can follow me on Patreon. Up to 20 chapters ahead for now. Patreon comp BlurryDream. BlurryDream creators' thoughts. 4 comments 0 vote. Chapter 30. Upon my return, 100 dragons bow their heads. Aegon still chose to let Tiiamat explore the dragon pit on her own. This time, Tiiamat flew to a canyon in a barren wasteland. Maybe luck was on her side, she actually found an untamed, earth yellow dragon there. Without hesitation, Tiiamat dove straight into its lair. There was no suspense, the yellow dragon didn't last even a single round. After effortlessly defeating it, she began to feast heartily. But from that point on, their dragon hunting plans no longer went as smoothly. They searched 3 canyons in a row but didn't find another dragon. Most likely, the remaining ones had already been tamed by other dragon riders. After all, the dragon taming tournament was just 1 day from ending. On the tournament's final day, the number of patrolling dragon riders in the canyons noticeably increased. Every time they came across Aegon and Daenerys, they immediately urged them to leave the area around the 14 flames. Aegon noticed that the dragons ridden by these supervisory riders all carried wooden structures the size of shipping containers underneath them. Through the ventilation holes, he could see the wooden rooms were packed with dragonkeepers. These dragonkeepers had been relocated from the Dragon Pit Canyon during the tournament, but now the supervisors from the Dragonlord Council were bringing them back. After a discussion, Aegon and Daenerys finally decided to abandon their dragon hunting plans. With the number of dragonkeepers and patrol dragonriders steadily increasing, their chances of being exposed were growing too high. So, the two of them mounted their dragons and flew toward the Gate of Freedom in Valyria City. On the return flight, a sudden memory struck Aegon. He had successfully tamed the Dragonlord Tiiamat and unlocked a rare epic achievement. The game system had rewarded him with a free lottery draw, but he had yet to use it. Remembering this, he quickly opened the game interface. You have 1 purple lottery draw. A purple item is guaranteed. Do you want to draw? Yes, Aegon confirmed mentally. The system chimed. Congratulations, you've obtained a golden quality item, 100-year legacy. A golden quality. Aegon's heart leapt with joy. He immediately clicked to view the item's full description. Item: 100-year legacy. Type: consumable. Quality: gold. Rating: 398. Effect: your house will safely endure for 100 years. Usable only while in Guardian Spirit mode. Note: with deep ancestral roots, endure a century of storms. After reading the description, Aegon couldn't help but marvel. This golden item was truly powerful. The 100-year legacy could shorten the time needed for the main quest by a tenth. The only downside was that it could only be activated in Guardian Spirit mode. He closed the item panel and began thinking about when would be the best time to use it. Along the way, they occasionally encountered dragon riders who had successfully tamed dragons during the tournament. Whenever those riders saw the King Tiiamat dragon beneath Aegon, their eyes filled with envy. Many came over to greet him, eager to build a connection. After all, anyone capable of taming a King Tiiamat dragon couldn't be just an ordinary member of a Dragonlord family. Even a common Dragonseed who succeeded in taming a Dragonlord would see their status and influence elevated significantly. Tiiamat, eyeing some nearby dragons, began drooling. She looked like she might pounce on them at any moment to tear them apart and devour them. Sensing danger, Aegon quickly used his mental power to suppress her urge. As Aegon approached the Shield of Freedom on Dragonback, a wave of cheers and excitement surged toward them like a tide. Compared to the opening ceremony, the closing ceremony of the dragon taming tournament was even more boisterous and grand. The entire upper echelon of the Freehold, as well as the vast population of commoners, now had their eyes fixed on this event. The newly emerged dragon tamers had the potential to shake up the internal power dynamics of the Dragonlord families. For the commoners, beyond being curious about what kind of dragons these tamers had managed to subdue, many had also placed bets on them, taking part in the widespread gambling. The Freehold was experiencing a booming economy. Whether first-class citizens or second-class commoners, nearly everyone had managed to save a bit of extra money, fueling the spread of gambling culture across society. In the Freehold, which prided itself on being invincible in this era, prosperity had bred a collective arrogance, providing fertile ground for unchecked indulgence and hedonism. This was the current state of the Valyria Peninsula. It was the age of the freehold, but also an age of rampant desire. At the top, the true dragons, the elite and powerful, lived in extravagance, promiscuity, and decadent indulgence. Meanwhile, at the bottom, the countless slaves could do nothing but toil endlessly, barely surviving on food no better than pig slop. At that moment, dozens of massive dragons perched atop the walls of Castle Freehold. Some had been tamed prior to the tournament, while others had been brought back from the 14 flames by the new tamers during the competition. The highest tower platform of the Shield of Freedom stood empty. The platform towered over 100 meters high, its four corners ablaze with fire. It was an exclusive throne prepared for King Tiiamat dragons, but its true master had yet to arrive. Inside the viewing hall below the Shield of Freedom, 14 heads of the Dragonlord Council families sat before a black obsidian table. The other 20-some Dragonlord family heads were seated along the outer edge of the hall. At this gathering, only members of the Dragonlord Council families were qualified to sit at the ancient, prestigious table and taste the meat that symbolized their elevated status. On the obsidian table lay peerless beauties from every race and nation across the world. Graceful and stunning, these women had now been reduced to mere decorations for the banquet. Sliced meats, meticulously carved and arranged, were laid out atop their fair, delicate bodies. Among the true dragon nobility, a new trend had taken hold, eating raw meat, especially raw monster flesh. These true dragons firmly believed that the rare and fresh meat of magical beasts could awaken the dormant dragonlord blood within them. And if that meat was served on the supple, fragrant body of a beautiful woman acting as the platter, that indulgent pairing brought them unmatched ecstasy. The closing ceremony is only a few hours away. If you ask me, chances are slim that anyone will manage to tame a dragonlord this time, said the head of House Valyries. This sentiment was echoed by many of the other dragonlord family heads. In the entire 10 Realms dragon taming tournament, you're already lucky if a King Tiiamat dragon even appears, let alone taming a dragonlord, added the head of House Aurelian offhandedly, casually picking up a fork and stabbing a piece of raw meat. But the fork jabbed into the woman lying beneath the meat. She cried out in pain, a soft moan escaping her lips. The head of House Aurelian simply cast a sideways glance at her suffering and curled his lips into a wicked smile. I remember the last time a King Tiiamat dragon showed up, it was Aegon of House Targaryen, wasn't it? That caused quite the uproar, said the head of House Edarian as he slowly rose and strolled to the upper balcony. Leaning on the railing with both hands, he looked out into the distance, eyes fixed on the 14 flames. I heard House Targaryen hasn't exactly been having smooth sailing lately. Their fleet was hijacked, and now they're not even showing up to the tournament's closing ceremony. Tisk, tisk, sneered the head of House Aurelian with open disdain. The head of House Valentine nodded in agreement, then turned his gaze toward the Dragonlord family heads seated below. His expression turned stern as he scolded them. HMPH, the Targaryens are far too greedy. They think just because they've got a Dragonlord-class dragon, they're something special. That they can bargain with us. What a joke. Did they even remember how we truly rose to power? The high-born Valyrians mastered the most profound blood sorcery in the world, that is the very foundation of the Freehold's strength. It's us, the 14 council families, who've spent vast sums maintaining Bloodsource Peak. And what have they done? What have you done? You think that's enough to earn a seat at this table? Valentine's outburst stirred unrest among the lower-seated Dragonlord family heads. Though they weren't part of the Freehold's core ruling circle, they still belonged to the upper class. Being spoken to with such contempt and condescension lit a fire of indignation across their faces. Someone muttered, "We'd love to be part of Bloodsource Peak, but when have we ever been given the chance? It's the ordinary Dragonlords supporting you, and you turn around and support Bloodsource Peak. So who's really putting in the work?" Exactly. Seeing the tension rise, the head of House Edarian quickly turned back from the balcony. He raised his hands and motioned for calm, gesturing for the room to quiet down. With a gentle tone, he said, "The head of House Valentine meant well. House Targaryen really has gone too far this time. They've been spreading fearmongering rumors left and right, shaking the very foundation of our freehold. And now, Aegon has even begun withdrawing his house's wealth from the Valyria Peninsula by ship. That's nothing short of betrayal, the most shameful betrayal of our Valyrian ancestors. That's why we turned a blind eye when House Aurelian intercepted their fleet. Here's what we'll do. The treasure seized from their ships, none of it will go to the Dragonlord Council. Every last bit will be distributed among all of you. Please understand, all our decisions come from a place of loyalty, to the unity of the Freehold, and for the future of us, the high-born Valyrians. His words, both firm and conciliatory, landed like a sweet fruit in the ears of the outraged Dragonlord heads. Their anger softened like fur being smoothed down, and soon, their expressions relaxed. A few sycophants even stepped in to loudly echo their support for the head of House Targaryen. In the viewing tower, the 14 council family heads were delivering a political lesson to the other Dragonlord houses. Meanwhile, the plaza outside the Shield of Freedom suddenly erupted into chaos. Shouts, gasps, and waves of noise swept through the crowd. A massive dark red dragon, more than 100 meters long, burst forth from the 14 flames with tremendous force. Its gigantic body streaked across the sky like a dark red comet, as if some ancient primordial beast had returned, exuding a terrifying and oppressive presence. Every dragon in the area sensed its overwhelming aura. In unison, they raised their heads, staring toward the direction of the 14 flames. The Dragonlord. It's the Dragonlord. Someone in the crowd shouted at the top of their lungs. A King dragon has appeared again. By the ancestors, bless the high-born Valyrians. An elderly white-haired man cried out as the dark red dragon soared closer. His eyes were red with emotion, tears of joy streaming down his cheeks. Woo! A woo! Howl! Roar! Comma! The dragons perched atop the walls of the Shield of Freedom seemed to respond to some invisible summons, letting out deep, resonant cries in unison. The sound rolled through the air like a grand symphony, as though they were celebrating the return of their king. In that instant, a magnificent scene unfolded, hundreds of dragons roaring together, their cries rising and falling like waves, echoing endlessly over the Shield of Freedom and rattling the very eardrums of those below. Inside the viewing tower, the Dragonlord family heads could no longer be bothered with the councilors' political lectures. They threw aside their usual composure and dignity, forcefully pushing past the council members in front of them as they surged toward the railing in a chaotic scramble. Reaching the edge, they leaned over eagerly, craning their necks to gaze toward the distant 14 flames. Could it be that one of their own Dragonseeds had tamed a Dragonlord? High in the sky above the 14 flames, the birthplace of Valyrian ancestors, a massive dark red Dragonlord, more than 100 meters long, was rhythmically beating its leathery wings as it flew in their direction. At that moment, Aegon never imagined that his return would stir up such a massive uproar. He had truly underestimated the nearly fanatical reverence the Valyrians held for King dragons. With that thought, he instinctively turned to glance at Daenerys beside him. Daenerys caught his gaze and gave him a small smile. Then she pointed toward the tower-like pinnacle of the Shield of Freedom and called out, "Do you see that platform at the top? Have Tiiamat land there. It's the throne reserved for tamed King dragons, a symbol of the Valyrians. Welcome to the Dragonlord." Aegon gave a slight nod, then guided Tiiamat to fly toward the summit of the tower. Dreamshade, flying alongside Tiiamat, gently descended onto the city wall of the Shield of Freedom, blending in with the rest of the dragons and taking its place among them. The tower's top resembled an Eiffel Tower with its spire removed. Tiiamat touched down upon it and, as if proclaiming her sovereignty, spread her enormous wings wide, overlooking the ancient city of Valyria. She let out a deep and powerful roar that echoed through the heavens. Roar! Roar! As the echo of her mighty roar resounded, the dragons circling above began to descend one after another, landing with heavy thuds. On the castle walls, while the crowds below erupted into thunderous, jubilant cheers, all the dragons bowed their heads ever so slightly, adopting a posture of solemn reverence, paying homage to the Dragonlord. If you'd like to support my work and unlock advanced chapters, you can follow me on Patreon. Up to 20 chapters ahead for now. Patreon.com, BlurryDream. BlurryDream creators' thoughts. 6 comments 0 vote. Chapter 31. The first aerial battle begins. Aegon looked out over the crowd cheering wildly for him. Seeing all those faces filled with passion and hope, his expression shifted slightly, a ripple of emotion crossing his face. In that moment, a thought occurred to him, something he had never considered before. Was there a chance to save the Valyrian Peninsula from its looming destruction? The idea flashed through his mind, but he quickly pushed it aside. This world might be real, but so too was the force known as destiny. According to the official doctrine of the destined godblood, destiny was described as a fundamental principle that governed all existence, an unseen force correcting the course of the universe to keep it aligned with its predetermined path. A cataclysm as monumental as the fall of the Valyrian Peninsula, with such world-altering consequences, would naturally be guarded by an unimaginably strong corrective force. Aegon considered that if the right opportunity came one day, he wouldn't mind trying to challenge that destiny. But for now, he didn't even have a single blood heir. His own life and soul still lacked basic security, he couldn't afford to throw everything away on a reckless gamble. He reached for the safety strap secured to the dragon saddle and unbuckled it. Then he rose to his feet. As he stepped from the saddle onto Tiamat's broad back, a sharp hiss sounded beneath his boots, as if he were stepping onto a scorching iron plate. It was a clear reminder of just how searingly hot her body was. Gripping the sharp horn spikes protruding from her back, he climbed along her armored bone plating, making his way up her long neck until he reached her massive head. Tiamat's head was far larger than a locomotive, there was more than enough space for a man to stand atop it. Now standing tall, Aegon truly embodied the phrase, man upon the peak. With both hands gripping a pair of horn spikes, he gazed down over the vast city of Valyria, taking in its grandeur. The ancient capital stretched across more than 2,000 square kilometers, and the sweeping view stirred a bold, swelling pride in his chest. Beautiful, isn't it? Came a slow, aged voice from beside him. Startled, Aegon turned quickly, only to see an elderly man in a flowing robe of gold and crimson silently floating just behind him. What sent a chill down his spine was the fact that Tiamat hadn't shown the slightest sign of aggression or discomfort at the man's sudden appearance. The old man's face was marked with mysterious symbols, like ancient totems. His long red robes fluttered in the biting wind, exuding a supernatural grace. The crimson runes embroidered on his garment shimmered faintly with light, adding to his air of mystique. Aegon immediately recognized him. This was the same old man who had appeared at the tournament's opening ceremony. Aegon gave a slight bow and cautiously asked, "You are?" The old man smiled and drifted forward, coming to float beside him. Like Aegon, he turned his gaze down to the city below and said in a calm, unhurried tone, "You can call me Pan, or just Elder, if you prefer. I'm simply an old caretaker of Bloodsource Peak." At those words, a prickling unease crept over Aegon, making the hairs on his arms stand on end. Was my dragon hunt in the 14 Flames discovered? Elder, what brings you to see me? Aegon kept his expression composed as he spoke, while secretly reaching out to Tiamat through their mental link, asking why she had allowed this stranger to approach so freely. But Tiamat's response left him more unsettled. According to her, there was no one standing on her head but Aegon himself. There's no need to be so tense, the old man said with a faint smile. A few young dragons dying in the 14 Flames means little to me. I'm simply intrigued by the dragon you're riding. Aegon's instincts immediately kicked in. His muscles tensed, and he silently prepared to give the order for Tiamat to strike. He knew one thing for certain, he would never hand Tiamat over to Bloodsource Peak. However, he couldn't gauge the old man's strength, and a rash move could easily result in mutual destruction. Tiamat has no interest in Bloodsource Peak, Aegon said, keeping his voice as polite as possible. He, you're quite the interesting little one, the old man chuckled strangely, then shifted the topic. You're Aenar's son, aren't you? Aegon responded flatly. The second fleet of House Targaryen was just taken by House Aurelian. That should leave you with one last fleet, the old man said, his tone firm, as if everything was already laid bare. Aegon stayed silent. He hadn't expected that Aenar's carefully concealed migration plan had already been exposed. I don't want to make things difficult for you. I'm willing to offer your House Targaryen a chance to leave the peninsula, the old man said, drawing a small bone fragment from his robes. He lowered his head and casually rubbed its surface as he continued, the question is whether you want it. What kind of chance? Aegon couldn't help but ask. Take your dragon and enter the champion's dragon duel. If you win, I'll grant House Targaryen permission to leave Valyria, the old man said evenly. Aegon frowned. In the original story, wasn't it Blackdread who took part in the dragon duel? But now, it's me. And if I lose? Aegon asked. Then you'll join the grand plan and follow my commands, the old man replied without hesitation. Aegon considered it for a moment. Then, in the end, he agreed. Good. But, can you really make that kind of decision on behalf of the Dragonlord Council? The old man didn't reply. He simply raised his hand and hurled the blood-red bone fragment toward Aegon. Then, like mist caught in the wind, his figure began to dissolve, scattering into the air until he vanished completely. With that dragon sigil in hand, not even the Dragonlord Council would dare defy you. His deep, commanding voice echoed faintly, lingering for a moment before fading entirely into the breeze. He's just gone. Aegon quickly reached out and caught the so-called sigil. On closer inspection, it was a smooth, polished shard of bone etched with intricate, blood-colored runes that pulsed with a strange, arcane energy. He used destiny points to scan it with his chip and retrieved the item's stats. Item: Dragon Sigil. Type: Consumable. Quality: Blue. Rating: 69. Effect: when activated with blood sorcery, purifies and elevates the user's true dragon bloodline. Usable only by Valyrians. Note: reforge the glory of the high-born Valyrians. Aegon was surprised, he hadn't expected such an unassuming piece of bone to be rated as a blue quality item. He wondered whether his current Dragonborn level bloodline could be purified and elevated to Dragonlord level through this item. But after a moment's thought, he found that unlikely. In the game's mechanics, blue quality items corresponded to elite level strength, while Dragonlord tier beings were firmly within the epic class. The gap between the two tiers was enormous. In Destiny, the classification system for both achievements and power followed the same structure: normal, rare, elite, epic, legendary, heroic, and mythic. Elite level equated to the strength of an ordinary magical dragon, while epic represented the level of a dragonlord. Carefully, Aegon stored the bone fragment away. In essence, it was half a pass for House Targaryen to leave Valyria safely. He then turned and climbed back onto the saddle, giving Tiamat a gentle pat to signal her to descend. By the time he reached the square, the crowd had already gathered en masse. The moment they saw him riding the dragon, people began waving excitedly. Many shouted for him to land right in the middle of the plaza. The crowd quickly cleared a wide space for him to touch down. But Aegon wasn't in the mood for praise or adoration. His only concern was returning to House Targaryen's stronghold to discuss with Aenar the champion's dragon battle proposed by the elder named Pan. Banners had already gone up around the square, inviting Aegon to visit various households. Some even promised generous gifts, stating their willingness to enter into deeper partnerships and negotiations. The level of fanaticism was beyond anything Aegon had expected. Some young women, even married ones, went as far as stripping completely bare, raising their arms toward the sky and boldly showing off their bodies. Air kisses rained down on Aegon like confetti. Seeing this, Aegon felt nothing but secondhand embarrassment. Without a word, he guided Tiamat in a wide arc over Valyria before Dreamshade joined him in the air, flapping alongside. Daenerys flew up beside him, wearing a teasing smile as she shouted, "Why didn't you go down? One of the Dragonlord families already offered 10 daughters for your hand." Aegon shot the cheeky girl an exasperated glare and didn't dignify her teasing with a reply. The two dragons spread their wings and soared out toward the countryside. Tiamat and Dreamshade, now growing more familiar with each other, playfully twisted and dove through the sky, performing aerial maneuvers with increasing agility. Bathed in the warm glow of the setting sun, they glided over the vast farmlands and fields until they reached the Targaryen hills. The dragons descended into House Targaryen's dragon pit. Fortunately, the pit had been designed with a spacious enough lair to accommodate a dragonlord. After instructing the dragonkeepers to properly care for the two new dragons, Aegon dismounted. Daenerys took his arm, and the two of them exited the cavern together. "I wonder where father went today. He didn't even show up to the closing ceremony," Daenerys said, frowning in confusion. "It is strange," Aegon replied, snapping back to focus. He quickly called over a dragonkeeper and asked, "Is Balerion in the pit?" The Lord took Balerion and flew out toward the sea around noon. "We're not sure where he went," the dragonkeeper answered honestly. Aegon and Daenerys exchanged a look. They already knew where Aenar had gone. Aegon waved the dragonkeeper away. "Father probably went to support the fleet," Daenerys guessed. "Earlier, on the tower at the Shield of Freedom, an old man told me the Second Fleet had just been raided by House Aurelian. Lord Aenar may have gone to try and recover it," Aegon said. The moment she heard that, Daenerys' face grew anxious. Aegon remained calm, thinking things through for a moment before calling for another dragonkeeper. "Bring Steward Farlan here." When Farlan arrived, he confirmed their suspicions. He also handed Daenerys a map, marked with coordinates of where Aenar was likely heading, along with a projected route of House Aurelian's fleet after the raid. "Let's go," Aegon said to Daenerys. "Time for our first aerial battle. If you'd like to support my work and unlock advanced chapters, you can follow me on Patreon. Up to 20 chapters ahead for now. Patreon com, BlurryDream. BlurryDream creators' thoughts. 6 comments 0 vote. Chapter 32, Dragonblood in the Skies. The dragon was, without question, the most terrifying weapon of war in this era. While other civilizations were still locked in brutal clashes with blades and arrows, the blood mages of the Valyrian Freehold had already succeeded in developing dragons, creatures that were, in essence, living, nuclear weapons. Not only that, but they were capable of fighting across both land and sky. Tiamat and Dreamshade were soaring high above the ocean. Their riders had deliberately guided them to an altitude of over 4,000 meters. At that height, the air currents were more stable and resistance was lower, making it ideal for long-range flight. It also made them harder to detect. Long before setting out to assist Balerion, Aegon and Daenerys had mentally prepared for battle. Since they would be entering combat, the best option was an ambush. Striking first would give them a decisive advantage, and a much safer position. When the dragons reached the coordinates Farlan had marked on the map, Dreamshade quietly broke formation, flying off from Tiamat just as Aegon had planned. The strategy was simple. Tiamat, built like a heavily armored juggernaut, would charge in as the frontline brawler, while Dreamshade would remain hidden and strike from the rear when the moment was right. The two dragons swept across the sea, scanning for any signs or clues. Today, the summer breeze over the ocean was mild and steady. The sea was calm, the sky cloudless, visibility was perfect. After circling for a while, Dreamshade noticed something unusual: scattered wooden debris from shattered cargo ships drifting on the surface. She immediately turned back and signaled Tiamat to follow. As the two dragons grew more familiar with one another, their coordination had also improved. By now, they could communicate simple signals using little more than low growls and short cries. Tiamat lowered her altitude, settling into the normal flight height for a dragon, clearly playing the role of bait. Meanwhile, Dreamshade took position overhead, silently hiding herself. Thanks to her mimetic scale armor, she was practically invisible, just a vague outline in the sky. Soon, faint ripples began to appear on the sea's surface, evidence of ships moving beneath them. Tiamat gave a deep, rumbling roar, a warning for Dreamshade to remain hidden. Dreamshade didn't respond, but she silently ascended a little higher in perfect coordination. After flying a bit farther, Aegon finally spotted House Targaryen's fleet in the distance. He also saw 4 dragons locked in a standoff in the sky, Balerion, and 3 adult red dragons belonging to House Aurelian. The tension in the air was thick, the battlefield momentarily frozen. The 4 dragon riders negotiating below quickly noticed Tiamat's approach. 2 of House Aurelian's dragon riders lit up with delight the moment they saw the red dragon approaching, assuming reinforcements had arrived. Aenar, however, felt his heart sink. Damn it, it looks like the enemy brought backup. Sure enough, the massive red dragon was flying straight toward the 2 dragons on the Aurelian side of the standoff. As Tiamat drew closer, Aegon cupped his hands to his mouth and shouted, "Brothers of House Aurelian. I've come to support you." Limond Aurelian frowned in confusion. "Wait, I didn't request reinforcements from the main branch. What's going on? Lord Aurelian, something's off. That red dragon looks like the mother of evil dragons from the 14 Flames, wasn't she still unclaimed?" One of the Aurelian dragon riders shouted after a closer inspection. But Aegon just kept smiling and yelled, "Come on, brothers, we're family. Don't attack. Be careful not to hit your own people." When Tiamat was less than 200 meters from the stalemated battlefield, the Aurelian riders finally realized something was wrong. "He's the enemy, damn it. The mother of dragons isn't slowing down. She's charging right at us." Limond shouted in panic. "Quick! Use dragonfire to stop her." "Ah. No. It's too late." Tiamat was already a step ahead. Before the stunned Aurelian dragons could react, she had gathered a terrifying charge of dragonfire. With a deafening roar, a thick torrent of flame, molten and viscous like lava, erupted from her jaws, blasting directly into one of House Aurelian's red dragons. In a flash, its wing membranes were incinerated by the searing heat. The creature screamed in agony, spiraled wildly, and plummeted into the sea. One blast, one instant, and a dragon was gone. The loss made Limond feel like his heart had been ripped from his chest. But what terrified him even more was Tiamat herself. The Dragonlord's body, massive and overwhelming, was now barreling toward him like a tidal wave of death. Tiamat was more than twice the size of Limond's dragon. She slammed into it at full speed, crashing directly into the dragon's chest with bone-crushing force. Almost at the same moment, Tiamat's massive jaws clamped down hard on the neck of Limond's dragon. The beast thrashed wildly in the air, and the 2 enormous creatures became locked in a brutal aerial grapple. Their wings beat frantically, spinning in the sky as the force of the struggle pulled them into a spiraling descent. Seeing Limond in such danger, the last remaining dragon rider of House Aurelian grew frantic. He was about to rush in to help, thinking that if he could just kill the dragon rider of the mother of evil dragons, there might still be a sliver of hope left. After all, no matter how fearsome Tiamat was, her rider was still just flesh and blood. One hit from a dragon, and he'd be dead. It was a good plan, just poorly timed. While the rider was fully focused on Tiamat, Dreamshade had already slipped silently behind him. A cascade of silver dragonfire poured down like a waterfall, mercilessly engulfing him. Both the Aurelian dragon rider and the dragon beneath him let out piercing screams. Dreamshade's breath didn't just burn flesh, it struck the soul itself. Compared to physical pain, the mental agony it caused was hundreds of times more terrifying. Overwhelmed by the torment, the final Aurelian dragon went completely berserk. In the most critical moment, it panicked and bolted from the battlefield, desperate to escape. The rider on its back, grievously wounded, had already slipped into a vegetative state. With no one at the reins, the terrified red dragon fled in blind terror, mindlessly seeking any path to safety. But its way forward was blocked by a black dragon. There, in its path, stood Balerion, the Black Dread. Aenar had recognized Aegon's arrival the moment he approached, and naturally, he wouldn't stand by and do nothing. But Tiamat's ambush had been so sudden, so swift, that Balerion hadn't had the chance to intervene in time. Now, Balerion opened his gaping maw and unleashed a terrifying breath of pitch-black flame. Like a curtain blotting out the sky, it swept toward the retreating Aurelian dragon, engulfing it completely. For a regular dragon, Balerion's breath was nothing short of a death sentence. Trapped within the storm of darkness, the red dragon screamed in agony. Lost in madness, it fired its own breath wildly in every direction, but it was futile. Balerion's black flame clung to it like a parasite, burning relentlessly, refusing to be extinguished even by the raging winds around them. The crew aboard the ships watched in awe and terror as the battle unfolded above them, a spectacle of fire and fury. And already, in the span of mere moments, the battle was nearly over. High in the sky, Tiamat was still locked in combat with Limond's dragon. But Limond, knowing he was doomed, had made his choice. If I'm going to die today, he thought, then I'm taking this monster with me. Even if the mother of evil dragons is too tough to die from the fall, I'll at least wound her. But Limond was far too naive. Tiamat's bloodlust had reached its peak. She no longer responded to Aegon's commands in the mental link, his plea to break free was completely ignored. Instead, Tiamat extended her massive hind claws, like steel hooks, and drove them deep into Limond's dragon. With a savage twist, she began to tear. As the red dragon let out shrieks of pain and madness, the sound of muscle ripping and sinew snapping filled the air, chilling to the bone. Then, in one horrifying motion, Tiamat tore Limond's dragon apart midair. Dragon blood erupted like a downpour, bursting across the sky before raining down into the sea below, staining the water a vivid, blinding red. The mangled halves of the dragon's corpse crashed into the sea with two thunderous splashes, sending waves surging in all directions. The sheer brutality of the fight stunned everyone watching, human and dragon alike. Aegon stared blankly at the blood-soaked sea, at the scattered remains of the dragon drifting on the waves. His mouth hung open slightly, his face frozen in disbelief. He'd thought he had already overestimated Tiamat's savagery. But once again, she had shattered every expectation. Boom! Another deafening explosion rang out. One more dragon, burned by Balerion's black flame, plummeted from the sky and slammed into the sea, sending up a monstrous wave and another echoing crash. Though two wounded dragons were still struggling in the ocean, the outcome of the battle was already beyond doubt. If you'd like to support my work and unlock advanced chapters, you can follow me on Patreon. Up to 20 chapters ahead for now. Patreon comp BlurryDream. BlurryDream creators' thoughts. 5 comments 0 vote. Chapter 33. I seek to defy destiny. Roar. Tiamat, as if still not satisfied from the battle, suddenly dove again, her massive body hurtling toward a red dragon still struggling weakly in the sea. A torrent of blazing, forceful dragonfire erupted from her mouth, slamming directly into the red dragon's head. With the momentum of her dive, the moment the flame struck, it triggered a violent explosion. A deafening boom rang out, and half of the red dragon's skull was instantly blown to pieces, a grisly, bloody spectacle. Aenar, watching from above, wiped the cold sweat from his brow. What kind of monstrous dragon did Aegon manage to tame? Thank the gods it's on our side. If it weren't, we'd be in real trouble. Without missing a beat, Tiamat turned her attention to the other red dragon thrashing in the sea, and, using the exact same method, unleashed another fierce breath attack. The second explosion followed swiftly, bringing Aegon's first aerial battle to a brutal close. As soon as the fight ended, Tiamat eagerly tried to dive into the sea to feast. Aegon quickly stopped her from acting on the impulse. With a body as massive as hers, once she hit the water, she'd never be able to take off again. Aside from agile dragons like Dreamshade, most adult dragons couldn't regain flight once submerged. They wouldn't drown, but swimming to shore would take far too long. Aegon and Aenar met in midair, circling their dragons. I can't believe you actually succeeded in taming dragons. Aenar called out, his face lit with a proud smile. Where's Gemon? Why didn't he come with you? Caught off guard, Aegon didn't know how to answer. Just then, Dreamshade swooped over to join them. Seeing this, Daenerys quickly shouted, Father, let's talk once we're back. It's too hard to have a conversation up here. She was right. In the sky, dragon riders often flew dozens or even hundreds of meters apart, and communication could only be done by shouting. Even in battle, they usually relied on hand signals. At that moment, the Targaryen fleet was still under the control of House Aurelian. Aenar didn't hesitate. He dove on Balerion, heading straight down to subdue the captains. Faced with Aenar's overwhelming pressure, the captains had no choice but to surrender and follow his orders. Soon, under Aenar's command, the fleet began slowly sailing back toward the Targaryen coast. The plan to discreetly evacuate from the Valyrian Peninsula was now an open secret. Sneaking away was no longer an option. Even if Aenar succeeded in escaping with the fleet, all it would take was one order from the Freehold, and he'd be forced to return. The Freehold now ruled the world in every sense. This wasn't an exaggeration, they commanded over 500 dragons. Their word was law, as if it were the will of the world itself. No one dared defy them. Before long, the three of them used rope ladders hanging from the dragons to descend onto a merchant ship that still had loyal crew aboard. Daenerys clung to Aegon's arm, recounting in detail everything that had happened during the dragon taming tournament, including the tragic news of Gemon's death. Aegon listened in silence. He didn't say much. After all, he and Gemon had long been rivals for succession. The last thing he wanted was for Aenar, or Gemon's mother, to think he'd schemed to get Gemon killed. As for Elder Pan's proposed championship dragon battle, that could wait. He'd bring it up once Aenar had finished processing everything from the tournament. Watching his daughter lean so affectionately on Aegon's arm, Aenar frowned slightly, a pensive look in his eyes. Meanwhile, Tiamat circled low over the sea, her massive wings stirring gusts of wind that rippled across the water's surface. From time to time, she let out a deep, rumbling growl toward Dreamshade. The two had been together long enough, Dreamshade immediately understood her intent. She answered with a clear cry and obediently descended to one of the red dragon corpses floating on the sea. Using her sharp claws, she carved out chunks of meat from the slain Aurelian dragon. Then, with her beak, she picked up a piece, beat her wings, and flew up to Tiamat, delivering it carefully to her waiting jaws. Tiamat threw her head back with a pleased roar, devouring the meat in just a few bites. She quickly urged Dreamshade to fetch more. So it went, like a mother bird feeding her chick. Dreamshade flew tirelessly between the sea and sky, again and again, delivering dragon meat to Tiamat. And because of the spiritual link between Aegon and Tiamat, her stats were updated in real time. Through his chip, Aegon could clearly see Tiamat's greedy feast talent growing steadily. In just a short while, the trait had already surpassed 5/10. Gemon has passed, Aenar said quietly, his gaze lowered, expression heavy with sorrow. Seeing this, Daenerys quickly offered gentle comfort. When our brother left, his face was peaceful. Aegon and I will carry on his legacy, we'll protect House Targaryen, no matter what. Aenar simply shook his head slightly, saying nothing more. He walked silently to the ship's rail and stood there, eyes fixed on the distant horizon. The coastline was slowly growing clearer ahead, but Aenar's thoughts were far away. His expression remained troubled, clouded by deeper concerns. Are you worried about the relocation plan, father? Aegon asked, noticing the gravity in Aenar's eyes. Aenar gave a small nod, still silent, his gaze never leaving the distant sea. Seeing this, Aegon began recounting what had happened earlier. The Dragonlord Council already knows about our plans to leave. When I returned today, I met an old man on the Shield of Freedom who called himself Pan. What? Aenar's head snapped around in shock. He stared hard at Aegon, as though trying to read something from his expression. Is he someone important in the Dragonlord Council? Aegon asked, puzzled by Aenar's reaction. Aenar's expression turned serious. Pan is the title of the Grand Elder of Bloodsource Peak. Each Grand Elder inherits the name. According to Valyrian legend, it was an ancestor named Pan who first tamed the dragons for the highborn Valyrians. Daenerys added, among the people of the Freehold, the elders of Bloodsource Peak are also respectfully called Pan God. You must have heard the name before. The moment he heard the term, Pan God, Aegon's mind flashed back to old earth myths from his past life, tales of Pan, the god of shepherds, of the wilds and nature, guardian of flocks and fields. And hadn't the first Valyrians also been shepherds? Only after mastering the dragons did they rise to power and become rulers of the world. The Pan of each generation must play a crucial role in the evolution of the Freehold, Aegon thought. In the Freehold, Aenar warned, never call an elder by name. You either address him respectfully as Pan God or simply as elder. It's our custom. He paused, then asked, what did the elder want from you? Aegon recounted his entire conversation with the old man on the Shield of Freedom in detail. The grand plan. The championship battle. Aenar murmured the two key terms, brow furrowed, his expression turning thoughtful and grave. Yes, father, Daenerys chimed in, while we were at the 14 Flames, we also met two Dragonblood guards from Bloodsource Peak. They accidentally let something slip, that I wasn't the first dragon dreamer to foresee the doom. All the previous dreamer families had already been quietly eliminated by the Dragonlord Council. Aenar's hand tightened unconsciously on the ship's railing. His knuckles turned pale. He said grimly, actually, back when I first tamed Balerion, Bloodsource Peak invited me to join this so-called grand plan. But I couldn't bear the thought of letting them take Balerion for their experiments. So I refused them on the spot. This grand plan they keep referring to, do you have any idea what it really is? Aegon asked as he moved beside Aenar and leaned on the railing. Now that he had tamed a Dragonlord, Aegon's strength and status were leagues above what they had once been. He carried himself with more ease before Aenar, and neither Aenar nor Daenerys seemed to mind. Aenar shook his head. I only heard a few vague things. The grand plan, it's about researching some kind of monster. They say it was born 2,000 years ago, deep beneath the 14 Flames, something from the Earth's core. It was eventually captured by the Blood Mages. What they hope to learn from it, I truly don't know. Aegon frowned, deep in thought, but found himself no closer to answers. Then an idea occurred to him. As long as I can pass down my bloodline, if House Targaryen and my legacy continue, I won't truly die. So why not dive into this so-called grand plan myself, uncover its secrets? Maybe I'd even get a chance to challenge the fate of Valyria's destruction. If I succeed, that would be a legendary feat. Aenar, seeing the conflict on Aegon's face, gently patted his shoulder and said earnestly, right now, what matters most isn't the grand plan, it's winning the upcoming championship dragon battle. Only then will we be allowed to leave this island. Otherwise, everything we've worked for will be for nothing. Aegon blinked, pulling himself back to the present. He gave Aenar a slight nod, saying nothing more. After a moment's pause, Aenar continued, you've suffered a great deal over the years, my son. I never should have sent you away from the family, to wander and struggle alone. That was my mistake. Aegon looked at him quietly, his expression calm and unreadable. Aenar stepped closer, placing both hands on Aegon's shoulders and speaking solemnly. Once we return to the family, I'll announce your true identity, and officially name you heir to House Targaryen. I can see that you and Daenerys have formed a bond during your time at the 14 Flames. So at the succession banquet, I'll hold your wedding alongside the announcement. Aenar spoke as if he hadn't noticed Daenerys' flushed, embarrassed face, and went on sincerely. Daemon's mother is also my sister. She never meant to target you. She simply acted from her position as the family matriarch, always putting the house first. She is, after all, Daenerys' mother. I hope, for the sake of family peace and for Daenerys, you can let go of the past. Aegon smiled and gently interrupted. His tone was calm and steady. You don't need to worry, father. Before Gemon died, he entrusted Daenerys to me, and asked me to look after his mother too. I won't let him down. I'll honor his last wish. At last, Aenar gave a small, heartfelt smile. He patted Aegon's shoulder once more and said warmly, you've never disappointed me. The future of House Targaryen belongs to you. If you'd like to support my work and unlock advanced chapters, you can follow me on Patreon. Up to 20 chapters ahead for now. P. A Trian Comp. BlurryDream. BlurryDream creators' thoughts. 9 comments 0 vote. Chapter 34. The Future Duel of Dragonlords. Father, you flatter me. It's my duty to serve the family. Aegon shifted his tone and responded to Aenar's praise with a calm smile. Aenar nodded in approval, then began explaining the champion dragon battle in detail. The champion dragon battle is held every year. We Valyrians have always honored martial strength. Dueling is in our blood. Years of conquest brought countless slaves and prisoners into the Freehold. In the beginning, the duels were fought between them. But as time went on, even dragon riders joined in, and the event gradually evolved into the champion dragon battle we know today. The winner earns the respect of the entire Freehold and gains unparalleled glory. As Aenar spoke, Aegon listened quietly. In his mind's eye, he could almost see a once peaceful people, shepherds by trade, who after mounting dragons became fierce, bloodthirsty warriors. Nearly every champion rides a King dragon. So your battle this time will be extremely dangerous. The next champion battle will be held in 6 months. With your dragon sigil, you're automatically qualified for the finals, Aenar continued. Aegon gave a slight smile. Dragonlord versus Dragonlord, Tiamat might actually enjoy the challenge. Daenerys, watching from the side, grew anxious at his nonchalant tone. You mustn't take this lightly. She trailed off with a sigh. Aenar and Aegon exchanged a glance and couldn't help but smile at her flustered demeanor. Why aren't your dragons flying with the fleet? Aenar asked curiously, glancing behind the ships. From where he stood, he could see Dreamshade still feeding Tiamat at the rear. My dragon swallowed a. Aegon had just started to explain when Daenerys stepped in, wrapping her arms around his and laughing as she cut in. His dragon used to be called the mother of evil dragons. She just loves eating dragon meat. Aenar chuckled softly and nodded. He had already witnessed how brutal that red dragonlord could be. One more violent habit didn't come as a surprise. Aegon let the explanation go, leaving it to Daenerys. Father, Aegon and I will wait here while Tiamat finishes eating. You and Balerion should go on ahead, Daenerys said. Aenar nodded. He had a feeling they were keeping something from him, but he was certain it wasn't anything harmful, to him or to House Targaryen. Aegon summoned Tiamat, and he and Daenerys climbed onto her back, waving farewell to Aenar. High above, on Dragonback, Aegon gently cupped Daenerys' face and kissed her deeply. It was a long kiss, and when they finally pulled apart, she was slightly breathless, smiling softly. My father is the kind of man who would sacrifice anything for the sake of the family, she said. If he found out Tiamat's secret, I'm really afraid it might cause unnecessary conflict between the two of you. Thank you for thinking of me, Aegon replied, his eyes full of warmth as he leaned in to kiss her again. But just as things were starting to intensify, Daenerys placed her hands on his chest and gently pushed him back. I don't want to do this on a dragon's back. Besides, our wedding is coming soon. I want to wait and give you everything, completely, on that sacred day, she said, blushing furiously. Aegon nodded with a smile, understanding. At that moment, Dreamshade was still feeding Tiamat. But Tiamat couldn't finish off 3 full-grown dragons in one sitting. After lingering over the sea for a while, she finally had her fill. The 2 dragons then each grabbed a large chunk of remaining dragon meat in their claws and flew toward the coastline. During the flight, they spotted a small, uninhabited island. The dragon meat was too heavy to carry far, so they slowly descended upon the island and landed. Tiamat and Dreamshade set the meat down, then curled up their massive bodies to rest. Tiamat was stuffed from overeating, and Dreamshade was completely exhausted from ferrying so much meat. Aegon and Daenerys, now well practiced in wilderness survival, quickly cut some brush and built a simple shelter. Aegon then waded into the nearby shallows and caught a few fat lobsters. Using dragonfire, he eagerly grilled them over open flame, preparing a seaside feast. Since Tiamat was still digesting and unable to move, they weren't in a rush to return to Targaryen Hill. So they decided to spend the night on the island. As night quietly fell, Aegon and Daenerys nestled together and gradually drifted off to sleep. Before long, Daenerys' spiritual presence stirred in the ether, drawing Aegon's consciousness along with it. He eagerly followed the pull, slipping into her dream. This time, the dreamscape unfolded as a vast, mist-covered hot spring. Steam curled lazily into the air, and in the haze, a figure could be seen holding a ladle, pouring warm water gently over her body as she bathed. The mist was thick, too thick to make out the figure clearly, but in Daenerys' dream, who else could it be? Aegon smiled knowingly. Without hesitation, he undressed and stepped into the warm spring. That graceful figure glided toward him like a playful fish. Then, a shower of kisses rained down on his cheeks, neck, and lips. Aegon closed his eyes in contentment, fully enjoying Dany's tender affection. Still, a stray thought flashed through his mind. Too bad dream intimacy doesn't count toward destiny points. I'm nearly out. Once we get back, I'll need to find Daenerys and replenish them. Back in the real world, a soft rustling sound came from inside the makeshift shelter. The two dragons resting on the beach perked up at the noise. Their massive eyes turned toward the shelter, then met each other's gaze. Dreamshade blinked her big, glistening eyes. The night passed peacefully. At dawn, sunlight spilled gently over the deserted island as Aegon and Dany stepped out of their shelter. Aegon still bore faint marks left behind by Dany's dream. The two exchanged a quiet smile and, without a word, leapt into the clear blue sea. After a quick wash, Aegon returned to shore. Glancing to the side, he noticed that Tiamat had completely devoured the rest of the dragon meat during the night. She's even developed a habit of midnight snacking now, he remarked with mild surprise. Daenerys walked over to Tiamat, running her hand over the creature's tough scales before turning to Aegon. She's grown so much again. I wonder how big she can get in the end. Maybe one day she'll swallow the whole world. Aegon chuckled and shook his head. Normal dragons can only grow 10 times through devouring. Tiamat has already consumed 7 dragons. If she wants to keep growing after 3 more, she'll have to devour a dragonlord. That's still incredible. Tiamat's already close to 200 meters long. That's the standard size for a dragonlord. Most dragons don't reach that until their old age, but Tiamat's only just entered her prime. Aegon smiled at Dany's observation but didn't reply. Tiamat probably won't live long enough to see old age. That shrank talent of hers is always working against her, eating away at her life. I can feel it, her lifespan is shrinking every day. In truth, she's already nearing the end of her prime. The two of them caught some seafood nearby and prepared a simple meal. Since Tiamat still needed time to fully digest her food, they wandered hand in hand along the island's powder-white beach. When we get back, how do you plan to explain things to Daenerys? Daenerys asked in a seemingly casual tone. We Valyrians have always practiced polygamy, it's common in the family. She'll understand. Aegon knew she was testing him, trying to gauge how much Daenerys really mattered to him. Satisfied with his answer, Daenerys lit up with a radiant smile. She stepped gracefully in front of him and slowly knelt down. Don't move, you wicked man, she murmured. By the afternoon, Tiamat had fully recovered. The two mounted the cursed dragon and began the flight back home. When they reached the skies above House Targaryen's bay, they saw that the fleet had only just docked. Yet after scanning the port, there was no sign of Aenar. As they neared the main keep, both Aegon and Daenerys sensed something was off. In the open space before the stronghold, a dozen adult dragons were sprawled out. Valyrian, alongside another of House Targaryen's dragons, stood firm, locked in a tense standoff with the outsiders. From above, Aegon and Daenerys exchanged a glance. Daenerys shook her head, signaling Aegon not to act recklessly. They were still within the outskirts of Valyria. Any dragon battle here would violate the laws of the Freehold, and would place them at risk of being hunted by the Dragonlord Council. Tiamat's massive frame, nearly 200 meters long, cast a shadow over the keep as she appeared in the skies above. The moment she showed herself, all eyes turned upward, she became the center of attention in an instant. The foreign dragons seemed to feel the overwhelming pressure. They growled uneasily, some turning toward their riders with low, wary cries. Daenerys, atop Dreamshade, was the first to descend, guiding her dragon down in a steady arc. She intended to figure out exactly what was going on. Tiamat remained in the air above the gathering, circling slowly. To the dragons that had dared to trespass against House Targaryen, she was like the sword of Damocles, looming above, ready to fall at any moment. If you'd like to support my work and unlock advanced chapters, you can follow me on Patreon. Up to 20 chapters ahead for now. Patreon comp BlurryDream. BlurryDream creators thoughts. 6 comments 0 vote. Chapter 35. The Old King, House Valerys. Aegon looked down from above at the dragons below. Compared to Tiamat, these dragons were only about 2/3 its size. Still, their sheer numbers made Aegon tense involuntarily. Under siege from so many dragons, Tiamat might be able to eke out a bitter victory, but as a dragon knight, Aegon would almost certainly perish in the chaos. At the gates of the Targaryen main castle, Several people dressed in dragon crowns and adorned in lavish attire were shouting at Aenar, spittle flying as they ranted incessantly. Aenar remained expressionless, replying to them with a few indifferent words. Then he pointed up at Tiamat in the sky, spread his hands, and ignored the arrogant clamor of the so-called true dragons. From such a height, the distance to the gate was far too great. Aegon couldn't hear a word of what they were saying. After Dreamshade landed, Daenerys, holding Aegon's bone dragon talisman, used its intimidating presence to successfully drive the self-proclaimed true dragons away from the castle gates. Even so, the heads of their houses lingered outside, unwilling to leave. Aegon felt a headache coming on. Being a dragon knight had its drawbacks. Communicating with people was a hassle. He had to remain in the sky to serve as a deterrent, yet couldn't come down to figure out what was really going on. After bickering for a while, the dozen or so dragon knights finally mounted their dragons, clearly dissatisfied, and flew off one by one. Only then did Aegon slowly descend and head straight for Daenerys, asking, why did they come to Targaryen? The Valyrian steel craftsman we brought over from Burning Steel Peak has been discovered by the Dragonlord Council. They came to demand his return. Thankfully, you had that dragon talisman, otherwise, they might not have backed down, Daenerys replied honestly. Good thing you made it back in time, Aenar added with a hint of lingering fear. Otherwise, I think they would have forced me to go before the Dragonlord Council for a public trial. I see, Aegon nodded slightly. Together, they entered the Targaryen main castle and walked along the corridor. I'd like to meet that craftsman later, Aegon said to Aenar. I want to see if I can learn the forging techniques for Valyrian steel. No problem. But forging Valyrian steel isn't easy. It takes mastery of several unique blood sorceries, and you have to be highly skilled in both the forging process and the raw materials, Aenar replied. Worth a try. If I can't learn it, I won't force it, Aegon said with a smile and a nod. They arrived in a spacious hall. There, Daenerys and Aegon met Gemon's mother, the matriarch of House Targaryen, whose expression still held a lingering sorrow. Though she had gained a son-in-law, she had forever lost her own son to the 14 flames, and he would never return. The grief in her heart was hard to dispel. After a brief exchange of words, the matriarch quietly took her leave, still heavy with sadness. This meeting was one of Aegon's most significant affairs within House Targaryen, symbolizing the family's recognition of the power he would hold in the future. Aenar, much like he had on the ship, offered a few more words of encouragement before Aegon left the hall with Daenerys. Outside, Daenerys and Ilya were waiting quietly. The moment Aegon stepped outside, Ilya rushed into his arms and clung tightly to him. Daenerys wore a pink strapless dress with a cinched waist and frilly embellishments, elegant and lovely. When she saw Daenerys emerge, she quickly gave a respectful bow. When Aenar had returned home earlier, he had specifically instructed the butler Farland to inform the two of them about Aegon's current relationship status. Daenerys would be joining Aegon's household as the mistress. With no powerful backing of their own, Daenerys and Ilya could only accept this arrangement in silence. Daenerys, however, took it all quite well. She understood that while she might no longer be the mistress, her standing within House Targaryen had not diminished. In fact, now that Aegon had become the designated heir, her position had only grown stronger. You're just in time. Let's take a walk in the garden, Aegon said warmly. I'll tell you all about what happened at the 14 Flames. As he spoke, he gently pulled Daenerys into his arms and gave her a soft kiss on the cheek. The four of them strolled through the castle's winding paths, chatting and laughing along the way. The atmosphere was quite harmonious, unsurprising, as polygamy was customary in the Valyrian Freehold, and women were generally accepting of new sisters joining the family. While Aegon was still at the Targaryen main castle, quietly deepening his bond with his wives, the dozen or so dragon knights who had left earlier had already reported back to the Dragonlord Council with news of Aegon's upcoming participation in the champion dragon battle. They also made special mention of the fact that Aegon held the dragon talisman, Pan's gift, which would allow him to bypass the preliminaries and enter directly into the final battle. In the Dragonlord Council, not a single person questioned Aegon's right to bypass the selection rounds and directly enter the champion dragon battle. After all, they had seen Tiamat with their own eyes. Its massive form, nearly 200 meters long, was undeniably that of a true dragonlord. The rules of the champion dragon battle were clear. Only a dragonlord could claim the title of champion. As such, not every tournament featured a King Tie dragon. In years without a Dragonlord-level contender, the ordinary dragons could only compete for second place, while the reigning champion Dragonlord would retain their title uncontested. Now that Aegon had entered the competition, it was certain, this year's dragon battle would witness a fierce clash between dragonlords. Such a heart-pounding showdown hadn't occurred on Valyrian soil in decades. For many years, the title of champion dragonlord had been held by the golden-scaled dragonlord of House Valerys. Like House Targaryen, House Valerys was one of Valyria's famed 40 dragonlord houses and, similarly, was not part of the Dragonlord Council. Nevertheless, the Valerys family held immense weight in the long history of the Valyrian Freehold, leaving behind a profound legacy. Back in Valyrian year 4000, the Dragonlord Council had not yet been formed. At that time, nearly 100 Dragonlord houses surrounded the 14 Flames, and among them, the most powerful was House Valerys. Dragons were fewer in number then, and each Dragonlord house typically had only 1 or 2 dragons. But the dragons of that era were massive, and House Valerys had both the greatest number and the strongest among them. Ambitious and bold, the Valerys family once rallied nearly half the Dragonlord houses, attempting to transform the Valyrian Peninsula into an empire under their rule. But in the end, they were defeated by a coalition of Dragonlord houses led by 14 powerful counselors. From that moment on, House Valerys began a steady decline. Still, their bloodline remained extraordinarily pure, so much so that nearly every generation produced someone capable of taming a King dragon. Even over 2,000 years ago, the family produced a prodigious dragonlord who managed to tame 3 dragons simultaneously. Unfortunately, as the family's overall strength continued to wane, they could no longer stand against the Dragonlord Council. That gifted dragonlord died with bitter regret. Back in the present, the news of the coming Dragonlord battle quickly spread, carried by the dozen or so dragon knights who had left the Targaryen main castle the day before. The moment the news broke, it was like a spark falling onto dry tinder, instantly igniting the fervor of everyone in Valyria city. The entire city erupted in excitement. A newly ascended Dragonlord, fresh from taming a dragon in the 14 Flames, was about to challenge the old champion from House Valerys, who had held the title for decades. This dramatic clash between old and new dragonlords would finally take center stage in this year's dragon battle. The news spread like wildfire, surging out from Valyria across the entire freehold. People everywhere were swept up in the discussion: who was stronger, Tiiamat, the mother of dragons, or Aidas, the golden-scaled dragonlord? Major betting houses seized the opportunity, opening new odds on the upcoming match, drawing in a flood of eager wagers. Time passed, and within a month, even across the summer sea, word had reached the continent of Essos. Nobles who caught wind of the coming duel could hardly contain their excitement. Many secured ship passages to the Valyrian Peninsula in advance, eager for the chance to witness the AWE-inspiring might of Valyrian dragonlords firsthand. The dragon arena outside Valyria city was no longer capable of accommodating the sheer scale of a dragonlord battle. To properly honor this historic showdown, the Dragonlord Council made an unprecedented decision. They opened the Valyrian grasslands, considered the sacred birthplace of the Valyrian people, to the public for the very first time. The champion dragon battle would take place there, on grounds consecrated for this momentous event. A blood offering to the ancestors of the Dragonlords. In the blink of an eye, 6 months passed. Within House Targaryen, Aegon had successfully been named the official heir. Not only that, but both of his wives, Daenys and Daenerys, were now carrying his children. Aegon was overwhelmed with joy at the thought of becoming a father. But he also had to face the most formidable opponent of his life, Aidas, the golden-scaled dragonlord, champion for decades. Aidas was a King dragon in his prime, over 200 meters long, with more than a century of dragon battle experience. The dragon knight who rode him was the most gifted descendant of a legendary dragonlord family, an opponent not to be taken lightly. If you'd like to support my work and unlock advanced chapters, you can follow me on Patreon. Up to 20 chapters ahead for now. Patreon.com, BlurryDream. BlurryDream creators' thoughts.